Hello, it's nice to meet you through video. I decided to do a video of my portfolio in addition to my binder because I feel that this would add a little bit of a personal aspect to my portfolio, and there are some pieces to it that I just feel would be better demonstrated through video as opposed to just within my portfolio. So you will have likely, I hope, received this by the time you're viewing this video. Um, and what a journey it was to put this portfolio together. I mentioned in my Meet the Author piece how I went through lots of laughter, lots of tears, and it was a really good opportunity to reflect on some of the work that I've done in this field over the past 10 years. So the first part of my portfolio, as I mentioned, I do kind of a piece around meeting the author myself. So through this, I kind of section off the different experiences that I've had and kind of briefly explain what those experiences look like. So I started in this field working at a summer camp for children and youth living under the poverty line back in Ontario. I worked for that summer camp for about 5 years, and that summer camp offered summer camp programming at no cost, and they also offered free after school and weekend programming throughout the year within the low-income communities within Ottawa. And I worked my way up in that position from junior staff at the camp, and then at the camp I worked my way up to out-tripping director, and I volunteered for the after-school programs, and eventually made my way up to program supervisor. So I have some stuff in my portfolio which goes through some of the pieces to working at the summer camp, and oftentimes the summer camp seems to be reoccurring within my portfolio. I mentioned it in my introduction to myself around how Christy Lake really holds a special place in my heart, and it really kind of laid the foundation within what I do in this field. So my portfolio is laid out pretty simply. I broke it down kind of into chapters for the 8 different areas that you want me to focus on, and I have my resume and an agency profile for the agency that I currently work for. So for the first section on chapter 1, establishing therapeutic relationships, I focused on how relationship building is at the core of what I do, and this was really something that I recognized when working at Christy Lake. So just so you know, in my portfolio, for each cover page, I have a little quote. All these quotes come from when I worked at Christy Lake, and they come from kids, staff, that kind of thing. Before leaving the agency, they made me a little goodbye present, which I have here, and it holds all the different quotes from the kids that I worked with. It's kind of falling apart now because I've moved so many times and it's just been all over the place, and using it for this assignment, it's got a picture of me there. So you'll see on all my cover pages that there's those kind of quotes and things like that, which adds a little bit of a personal touch to my portfolio. I have other things here too from Christy Lake around appreciation that they made for different volunteer appreciation, things like that. I also did a lot of fundraising for Christy Lake through my high school and when I was in college, and they have a Canoe for Kids fundraiser, which I participated in and got some people in my college program to do. We were team made in the 80s. We're up here in the corner, and I got this plaque for doing that. I've kept a lot of stuff, as you can see, over the years. I'm been working on my portfolio in my spare bedroom, and it's been covered with portfolio stuff for the last couple weeks. It's just kind of taken over. So, but like I said, it's been nice to kind of go through all these things. So the first chapter is establishing therapeutic relationships, And for each chapter, I also got my current supervisor to fill out the checklist. So for each chapter, I started off with where she thinks I'm at in that specific area in the checklist. So just so you know that that's who kind of graded that. So as I said, relationship building has always been at the core of what I do, and I outline in my reflection piece around how the work of Carl Rogers and person-centered, child-centered therapy is really also kind of tying in with relationship building, and I included a quote in here, which is also in my assignment that I provide as evidence, that says, where does it start? In my early professional years, I was asking the question, how can I treat or cure or change this person? Now I'd phrase the question in this way: how can I provide a relationship which this person may use for his own personal growth? And that quote really kind of resonates with me as well, because I think we all kind of come into this field asking, what can we do to help? How can we fix this person? How can we make their problems go away? But Carl Rogers really suggests that it's in fact through our relationships with people where we create change and help them get to the goals that they want to achieve. So as I said, relationship building was something that I really recognize the importance of it when working at Christie Lake Kids. I've also got a ton of chronicles from each session. I'm not going to go through each one with you, but we kind of, every session at camp, we do a camp chronicle, and the kids would write in them and we would write in them, and there's a picture of me in my cabin, and you know, some of the comments say, you know, thank you for everything that you've done, and this summer has been amazing, and this and that. So they're really fun to look back on and see all the pictures and what the kids wrote and things like that. So I provided a past assignment as evidence for this section. My assignment on articulating a helping philosophy, where I reflect on the work of Carl Rogers, and that just kind of goes a bit more in depth. And I also provided another certificate from Christie Lake, where there's some quotes from kids, such as, I want to thank Angela for making my life happier, healthier, and helping me get through the tough times. I really look up to Angela because she is a good role model. She is really positive and fun to be around. She's never upset. She is a really good leader. And there's some pictures of myself in different programs. And just so you know that all the pictures, we had signed consents from the clients, so that's not to worry. The next section on working collaboratively with a supervisor, I provided evidence from one of my evaluations, and in the back of my portfolio, one of the appendices is the 3 evaluations that I've had in my current work at Aspen. So I highlighted the piece around supervision where my supervisor commented saying that Angela always attends supervision times prepared and organized, to use the time effectively to discuss clients, and readily accepts feedback. Angela remains open to new ideas and perspectives of this writer, while also providing feedback in regards to role and program challenges in a respectful manner. So in my reflection, I kind of speak about how I really appreciate supervision, and I find that it's a way that I've been able to enhance myself as a professional. And I really appreciate that time with my supervisor, to whether it's to bounce ideas off her or to discuss goal setting, that kind of thing. And it really does help me as a professional. And the current agency that I work for, Aspen Family and Community Network Society, they have a very formal way of doing supervision to meet standards as an agency for Canadian Accreditation Council. So we're expected to do supervision with our supervisors at least once a month. So there's always a formal supervision that happens on a monthly basis, where I'm able to touch base with my boss about anything regarding my caseload, like I said, goal setting, that kind of thing. So it's just a really great opportunity to connect, and it really helps me stay focused. I provided an example in my reflection around how currently in my position I'm looking into developing a program for the youth in our foster care program that can act as relief for foster parents, and it can help us kind of stand out from other fostering agencies, and which is somewhere that our whole agency is trying to move towards around what makes us different. So I mean that goal just kind of kept getting pushed further and further and further back because of staff shortages, busyness, that kind of thing. And recently I've spoken with my supervisor around what I want to do, some different ideas, and I finally made a deadline for myself to have it up and going in the new year in January. So and supervision got me to that point. If I didn't have supervision, then that goal would be just gone. It would never be followed through with. So supervision just really kind of helps me stay on track and holds me accountable for the goals that I'm trying to achieve. So I really do appreciate it, and I'm happy to work for an agency where it is so formal and they make sure that it gets done. For the next section, chapter 3, observing and recording. So in this chapter, I actually speak about my experience during my third year practicum in college, where I worked for the Children's Aid Society, and I worked in a parent support group for parents of infants from 0 to 12 months, and I also worked in their child access program doing supervised visits, where I was eventually hired after doing my practicum. So for this chapter, the evidence I provided is actually my third year child and youth work skills assessment, which my supervisor filled out both in the fall and winter semesters. So I'll speak specifically to the parent support group. In that group, parents would come to the program and they would have about an hour and a half with their infants, where we would observe and support when needed, and then we would go to group and facilitate groups on topics such as development, attachment, nutrition, you name it. Anything that has to do with infants we would teach in those groups, and then we would look to see if the parents were able to kind of apply some of the things that they were learning to their infants in kind of that real life situation. So we had a really neat room that was specifically designed for babies, and it gave parents the opportunity to really show their skills. So in that position, I was obviously expected to observe the parents and the families, record my observations, and those case notes would go to my supervisor, and she would eventually write up a final report for that family's caseworker, and that would help in a lot of different court cases to determine whether the parents were fit to have their children returned to them, or if they needed additional supports, whatever that might look like for the parents. So my observing and recording and my notes were extremely important to those families, because for some of them it ultimately could be a determining factor of whether or not their children would be returned to their care. So as much as observing and recording can be a bit of a pain sometimes, and case notes can seem like they just always add up and there's always something to document, I really do see the importance of it in the work that we do as professionals, and it really does help get families to where they want to be, and supports in the professional aspect of things too. So for the next chapter, applying developmental theory. So this is a fun chapter. This was a chapter that got me smiling, it got me crying. So in this chapter, I specifically focus on my service learning project in Nicaragua, which I participated in my third year of my child and youth care program at Algonquin College. So for the evidence that I have for this chapter is just some things from my trip. I have some stuff here too, just that are not included in my portfolio, but just pictures. We helped build a classroom onto an existing school in a secluded village of Haulover, and then the second week of it, we went to the capital city of Managua, and we helped paint one of their youth drop-in centers. So that's kind of the two main projects that we worked on. I have a newspaper clipping from the trip that was in the Algonquin Times when we came back. And it's in my portfolio, but you may not be able to see it that well. But there's a picture of me hacking down a tree. And there's some quotes from myself in this newspaper clipping that kind of speak about the trip. So my main focus for this part of the portfolio had to do with this trip really giving me the opportunity to recognize my own ethnocentrism and how the way of different cultures and how that affects development and how that can look different in so many different cultures. So I think that oftentimes in Western society we suspect that if families are not following our norms, then we just automatically think that that's wrong. But this learning opportunity really helped me reflect on that just because it's different doesn't mean it's wrong. So I give the example in my reflection around the supervision of children. So in Haulover in our first week, so that was like more of a secluded village where they had no running water in their homes. They essentially lived in what we would call shacks here in Canada. And I found that in the town, the children just ran free and there was no adults around, and the children were really young, and I never really saw any parents supervising them. And that was hard for me because in Canada, parents often know where their children are unless they're a certain age, but these were 4, 5, 6-year-olds that were out running around playing, and there was no supervision. I remember one day when we all went to the beach and a bunch of kids just followed us, and there was no parents, and they stayed with us for hours. So that doesn't necessarily mean that it's wrong. Lots of the children that I met there were extremely bright, mature, really intelligent, sweet little kids that there's no concerns really with their development. They were developing just fine, and like I said, just because it's different doesn't mean it's wrong. So that was really something that I learned throughout my experience going to Nicaragua, amongst many, many other things. It was really an eye-opener for me around how the majority world is living and how we really are so fortunate here in Canada in the minority world. And despite in our world, a lot of adversity, these families, these people are happy, they're intelligent, they are loving, they're caring. I can't find it, but I think I put it in my evidence, is a letter from my host mother, and she was a teacher at the school, and she had to be just the sweetest, most caring lady I've ever met. And you can see by her writing, even though she's a teacher in Canada, this writing has poor grammar and some things are not spelled correctly, and she's a teacher. But it's different, and that doesn't mean that it's wrong. And she really cares about her community, and she's happy. And I mean, I got the opportunity to meet her daughter and her son, and she's a very good mom, and her children were being raised to be the best they could be, and she was passing on her values of caring for her community and high education onto them. And so it was a really, really neat experience. I would highly recommend to anyone participating in a service learning project. And in Chapter 5, Applying Ecological Systems Perspective, the evidence I use is from my case study assignment in CYC 338. And I speak about a part of that assignment where I apply the ecological systems perspective to a youth that I used to work with in a group home setting. So I go into great depth in my case study, but in my reflection I just spoke about how this specific youth and her ecological model, and how some of the aspects of her model would sometimes negatively influence her. So she was a youth where her ecological model also consistently changed because she lived in many different environments. going from different foster homes to different group homes to living with family. She was kind of all over the place. By the time she got to us at the group home, she had a lot of inconsistency and unpredictability. And because of that, I mean, in her microsystem, if we look at her peers, she had a lot of peers that didn't make good choices, so she often followed them when it came to using drugs and alcohol or criminal activity or not engaging in school, that kind of thing. That was a great influence on her. And then looking at kind of the larger system and how that influenced her, I reflected on how Child and Family Services and how that was a system that greatly impacted her life. But wasn't kind of a day-to-day direct impact. But essentially, Child and Family Services had been making all the big decisions for her for many years, and that was kind of an outside system that was influencing her. So I reflect on that in that chapter. And then chapter 6, planning and implementing interventions. The example or the evidence that I used for this is from a programming assignment in my third year practicum. In my third year practicum, I also got the opportunity to work one-to-one with a child protection worker, and he allowed me to work one-on-one with one of his clients who was a single mom of a toddler at their Head Start program. And I got the chance to meet with this mom and plan some interventions around goal setting, because she identified that goal setting was a struggle for her, and she wanted some support with prioritizing her goals. So I created an intervention on how to support her with that, and the program assignment also includes some of the groups that I ran in the parent support group, and the groups that I facilitate in there. And then in my reflection, I also speak about how in my current position, I kind of implement a lot more kind of informal interventions on a case-by-case basis, which usually is incorporated into service planning and case conferences and meeting with the case team to plan interventions that best meet the needs of the child on my caseload. And then chapter 7, reporting, and for this I reflect on my current position where I do a lot of report writing. For each child on my caseload, I'm expected to do a 45-day assessment report and service plan, and then every 90 days I'm expected to do a progress report and service plan, and then for foster parents I'm expected to do annual reviews. So lots and lots of report writing in my current position. Files are this big because of all the reports that we write. So I kind of reflect on all of the opportunities that I have in my current position for report writing, and how I've come along with that. I reflect on how the importance of being objective, but how I sometimes struggle with that. Oftentimes in my position, I work really closely with the families and children, and sometimes I don't always agree with certain decisions that are being made, so it's important for me to be objective in my reports, but I do sometimes struggle with that because sometimes I don't agree with certain directions for certain families. And for evidence for this section, again, I give an example from one of my performance evaluations, where my supervisor comments on my written communication and report writing skills. And then chapter 8, final chapter, I speak about my professionalism, and as evidence for this chapter, I've provided some letters of reference, which I've obtained over the last couple years. So I think professionalism is something that I'm constantly learning about, evolving, enhancing throughout my career. I think it's important to be professional towards other professionals, towards clients, ensuring that boundaries are being maintained and confidentiality is being maintained. And I just think that it's important in our field to act as professionals. I think sometimes we can be mistaken for childcare workers or babysitters or what have you, and I think it's important for us to maintain that professional stance because we are professionals, and I think it's important that we're viewed as such. And then I have two appendices where the first one are my performance and progress reviews, and then Appendix B is some of the certificates that I've obtained in my Child and Youth Care diploma from Algonquin College. there was a lot that I wasn't able to include in this portfolio, or else it would have been ginormous. I've done lots of different work, especially my diploma of child and youth care back in Ottawa. I have many different programs that I've implemented. This is an anger management program. Couldn't fit that in there. I've also, these are other kind of activities that I've done with kids. A massive case study that I did in my first year, which all could be tied into the different areas, but as I said, it would have just been way too much. So I tried to make it concise, yet hopefully I was able to demonstrate my competence in all 8 areas. I hope you enjoy reviewing my portfolio as much as I enjoy putting it together. It was, like I said, a really great opportunity to kind of reflect on my experience as a child and youth counselor and really see where I started, where I am now, and all of my different experiences. So I hope you enjoy.